So look what I've got. This is the new TTArtisan 40mm F2.0 autofocus lens for Nikon Z. Look what I also have. This is the Nikon version of that same lens. It's the 40mm F2 special edition. It comes with the Nikon ZF. And because I needed another one, I also have the Voigtlander knocked-in F1.2 manual focus lens. Why do I have these lenses? Why do I have all three of these lenses? Don't ask me. I don't know why. I do plan on only keeping one, so at the end of this review, I will be keeping just one. The big difference between the three, I would say, is I mean, in terms of image quality, not from like just early first glance, wide open. Of course, the Voigtlander is going to have the dreamiest kind of bokeh of the three. It's at 1.2, so it's got a really shallow depth of field. And I've shot for a couple of months with it already, and it's a great lens. I love it. I've had some really beautiful images come out of it. The one thing I will say is I haven't gotten used to going back to manual focus. Um, and probably because I haven't used manual focus lens in a long time. So the one thing about the Voigtlanders, the focus throw is pretty long. So it's not like an M mount lens where, Leica lenses are really well known for really short focus throws. The Voigtlander has a pretty long focus throw. Other than that, it's a lovely lens. It's great, produces great images. The color is amazing. So, when looking at the other two, the Nikon versus the TTArtisan, spec-wise are about the same, right? Like they're f2 lenses. The big difference is that the TTArtisan has an aperture ring, and that is the one reason I got it. I really want a lens with an aperture ring. I want to be able to control my aperture without having to use one of the knobs. And maybe that's a small thing, but there's something to having a physical ring to be able to adjust it. The difference between the Nikon and the TTArtisan is pretty small. Like the weight, in terms of weight and size, the Nikon is a bit more chunky. It's a little thicker, and I'll show you some images of how that looks. In terms of weight, it's about a 6 gram difference, so it's really minuscule. The TTArtisan is about 6 grams heavier than the Nikon. But enough about that. Let's look at some images. Okay, here we are. So let's first start with what these things look side by side. On the left here, you'll see that the Voigtlander is quite a bit taller. And these are without the hoods. I decided to not show the hoods because just it's not necessary. In the middle is a Nikon, and you can kind of tell I know these aren't to scale, but like you can tell that the Nikon is a bit thicker. It's probably a good 2, 3, maybe 4 millimeters thicker than the TTArtisan. Actually, a good comparison would be like the base of this lens, of the Nikon lens, and the base of the TTArtisan lens is about the same, but you can notice down the barrel, it's much skinnier. Yeah, and in terms of height, it's about the same height as the Nikon. So that's how they look side by side. Here's another view from the top. All great looking lenses. The TTArtisan is all metal, which is great. I think there's a few plastic pieces, like where the hood attaches is plastic, apparently. But it feels the build is really solid. The aperture ring is very clicky. It's very comparable to the aperture ring on the Voigtlander. If you've ever felt a Voigtlander lens before, it's just really nice clicks to it. And then let's look at some images. So I just took some images from my backyard, just really quick. I wanted to see what it looks like wide open. Here's a flower that I saw. I really want to get much closer, but I couldn't. I had to be about half a meter away to be able to take this shot. And you can see the bokeh is pretty clean. It's very soft on the outside. In terms of detail, it's pretty soft, wide open. I did take some shots earlier that showed what it looks like, stopped down to around f4, and it looked much sharper. It looked comparable with the other lenses. Here's another one, and let me get the details out. Here's another one at f2. Again, sharpness isn't entirely great. Like I think if I took this with the Voigtlander, you'll see that it's much sharper. Um, and here's another one of some tomatoes that's growing in my backyard. The sharpness is acceptable. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not entirely soft. And I actually really like the character of it. I think it just provides a little bit more character. You can see that. I mean, it's hard to compare, but like in this shot, but like the edges do appear more soft in other images I shot. But I don't really care about that. I think most of the things I take photos of are going to be, for the most part, in and around the center area. So even if it's out wide open, but I usually shoot, stop down about, 2.8 to f4, depending on the situation. Here's another f4, f2 shot. I just wanted to see like the fall off, what it looked like. I was focused on this part of the image, and you can see the fall off is fairly clean going, across, but it's pretty shallow. It's not as shallow, obviously, as the Voigtlander, but it's pretty shallow. All right, now we're going to get into comparisons of with the other lenses. So this is still on the TTArtisan. This is my dog Max, and he is my subject for today. So this is at f2. I noticed that this is pretty dark, so we're just shooting at 8,000 ISO 8,000. So I switched to black and white just to get a kind of a nicer rendition. So again, f2 and pretty, it's a nice detail. You can see it's sharp enough, but you'll see as we go on, you'll see the sharpness, the difference between sharpness on the TTArtisan versus the Voigtlander. On the sharpness between this and the Nikon is very comparable. Yeah, and people, the early reviews I've heard about this lens is that there's extreme bokeh on the edges, or not bokeh, sorry, vignetting on the edges. I'm not seeing that, at least not in a way where it's really unpleasing, where it seems like a bug, but it seems fine to me. It seems acceptable. Now, if I shot it probably at a sky, wide open, it'd probably be a lot more noticeable. But in an image like this, it's not at all noticeable. Here's some more images of Max. This one came out quite nice. I think this rendered really nicely. This is at ISO 10,000. It's pretty dark where I was taking this. So again, more TTArtisan. Here is, now we're getting into the Nikon. So I tried to take this same shot with the TTArtisan, but I couldn't because I couldn't get close enough. I'm about a foot, the lens is about a foot away from Max's nose, and you can see the detail it's focused right on his nose, and you can see the detail of the fur right there in his eyes. It falls off when it gets those eyes. So that is a one big plus on the Nikon, is you can get much closer. And the following shots here are all with the same distance, within like a foot away from Max. So you'll see a little bit more detail because I am closer. And these are all, again, this one actually, why is it on f4? I don't know why I stopped down at f. Oh, I think maybe because I wanted to see his whole face in focus. But it's a nice rendition. This is f4. Again, f4. And back to f2 on the TTArtisan. I don't know why these are not in order, but like here's another of the Nikon at f2. And then another one at f2, f2. Now, here's the Voigtlander. It doesn't say Voigtlander on the lens profile, it just says 40 f1.2. You'll notice right away is the shallow depth of field. It's extremely shallow. And as a matter of fact, it's really hard to focus with Max when he moves. And luckily he was not moving much, so this wasn't too bad. But you can kind of see the fall off here. It's very dreamy, and depending on the subject, this works out really nicely, especially with color. But yeah, that's a comparison of what it looks like with f1.2. I will show you I do have some images that show you what it looks like at the f2 level. Let's see if we can get to those. This again, f1.2. Another one at f1.2, 1.2. And here's a comparison of, like, I did this earlier with the Nikon at f4, so I can see his whole face, kind of more of his face in focus. Looks quite nice. And then here's the f2 equivalent. So one thing you'll notice is I was saying earlier that the sharpness at f2, when it's stopped down on the Voigtlander, it's much sharper. You can kind of tell by the little hairs on his face here. There's a lot more detail there than there was on the TTArtisan and on the Nikon, and a few more. And here's one in color. And I think that's it. And, as you can see, the difference, this isn't a scientific test. This is just a really quick, test for myself to figure out which one do I want to keep. I think at this point for my usage, I don't know which one I'm going to keep yet, but I really like the TTArtisan in terms of how it feels with the aperture ring. I am bummed out that I can't focus closer. I can't get to the subject closer. So I don't know what I'm going to keep, but and I'm mixed about the Voigtlander. I do love the feel and the build of this lens. This lens is just phenomenal in terms of how it's built. I've never had a lens this nice before. I do want to keep it, but in all practicality, in terms of how often I'd use it for my use cases, I think if I had to, I would probably always, or most of the time, go towards the autofocus. So that's my early conclusion. Thanks for watching.